G'day folks, Wren here, and today we're going to go through the Australian Readathon prompts and I'm going to recommend you some books for them. If you haven't seen the announcement video for the Australian Readathon, I will leave that linked below, as well as all of the co-hosts, which is Mel from a book feed named Mel, Stef from the Novelty Corner, and Meredith from Reading with Merb, as well as myself. And this is a readathon focusing on Australian authors, and it'll be running all of November. Specific details down below. But we also have a bingo board for the readathon. So I thought I might go through all of the prompts and I will recommend 3 books for every prompt. I'm not going to give too much detail on all of these books because there's several. This was a little bit of a struggle. I have maybe potentially stretched a prompt or two, but I really wanted to make sure I was recommending books that I've read, because I've gotten into the habit in the past of recommending books I haven't read before, and I want to try and change that. So I've read all of the books that I'm going to mention. So 3 books per prompt. Let's get into it because this is going to take a while. So the first prompt on the bingo board is LGBTQIA+, and the first one I have for this is Upside Down by N.R. Walker. Upside Down is a really fantastic book, and this was almost on my favourites list for the host favourites, but this is a male-male romance book with asexual main characters. So both of our main characters are asexual, and they enter into a relationship together, and it's very sweet, very cute. It's also a really good kind of introduction to asexuality, because it really does talk about it. It gets a little info dumpy with just explaining asexuality and all the different types of sexuality that fall under the asexual umbrella, but it's really good knowledge and it's just such the sweetest little romance. So next up is Tangled Vows by Anna Stone. This is where I stretched it a little bit. I can't find out if Anna Stone is Australian, but she lives in Australia with her girlfriend. So I might have stretched it. I'm not sure. But Tangled Vows is a female-female romance with a bit of fake dating because one of our characters pays the other. And it also has a lot of dom-sub going on in there. Got some good kink stuff, a really interesting relationship between these 2 women. I really enjoyed it. It was a good little spicy time. Very fun. Then the last one for this first prompt is The Friend Scheme by Cale Dietrich. This is a male-male YA, I don't know if I want to call it a romance, but kind of just a contemporary, we'll just say that. This is about mafia. Kind of. This guy is in the mafia because of his family, and someone is kind of infiltrating it, and they're calling it the friend scheme because that's what's happening. It's really interesting. I do really enjoy Cale Dietrich's works. They're always a fun time, so I do recommend giving his books a go. The next prompt is an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander author. The first one I have for this is Tell Me Why by Archie Roach. This is Archie Roach's memoir, and it's really, really well done. He's lived such an interesting life, and I was gonna go see him in concert a year or 2 ago, and I wanted to read this book before then, so I did read the book, but then he had to postpone his concert because of a lot of his health issues, and now he's passed. So that's pretty sad. So I really wish I could have gotten to see him, because fantastic human. Just the love he had for his wife, it's so beautiful. But a really, really well done memoir, and I highly recommend. The next one is Women's Talk, which is a poetry collection about motherhood that was put together by the women of Central Australia. There's no one person that has been credited as putting this collection together. It was just this women's group in Central Australia that wrote a bunch of poems. A lot of them are about motherhood. These women talking about like their mother or grandmother or what it's like to be a mother. It was very kind of focused on that, but it was a really beautiful collection, and there were a few that were in the language of that particular mob, which was really interesting to read, and there was like a translation next to it, and I think that was a really beautiful thing to do, and it was a really good time. And the last one for this is Fogger Docks by Bruce Pascoe. This is a very odd and interesting story about a fox that thinks it's a dog and people's reaction to that. That's kind of all I can say, is it was a very interesting story. Give it a go. The next prompt is a middle grade or YA book, and for this I have Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is such a fun sci-fi series where we get a crew of misfits and they're off to save the world. I really loved all of the characters in this, and I love the dynamics between the characters. It was a really good book. The series kind of went a little downhill, but it was still a really fun time. Next up is Took the Children Away by Archie Roach. This is a picture book that was put together by Archie and his wife, and it is kind of a novelization in a way of his most famous song, which is Took the Children Away, and his wife did all of the illustrations in it. And it's just such an important topic to talk about because it's talking about the stolen generation. It's such a unique little book, and like, you know, one of the most powerful songs in Australia, I think. Then the last one is Havard Racer by Matthew Riley. This is another sci-fi book, and this is a retelling of Jason and the Argonauts, and this is about a guy called Jason going to race his hover car. It was a very fun time, and Matthew Riley always really writes very entertaining books. Next up is a hot setting. So for this I have XCT, which is Extreme Champion Tournament by Sean Paulett. This is a comic series, and it is kind of, as the title suggests, it's a tournament of champions to find the most champion. And it's got a lot of gladiatorial things in it, but there's also a lot of monsters. And it was a really interesting time, and I really need to continue on with the series. Next up is Kindred, 12 Queer Love Oz YA Stories by Michael Earp. So this is a collection of 12 stories by 12 Australian authors. They're all YA, they're all kind of romance, they all have different things that they bring to the story, but they are all queer stories. I put this in hot setting because there are some that are written during the hotter weather in Australia, so if it fits, it sits, so it's sitting. The one good thing about anthologies is that you get to experience some authors that you haven't ever heard of before, and sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But this one was mostly good, and there were some really interesting concepts being explored in this book. And then the last one for this is Australia Day by Stan Grant. Australia Day is in January, so it's hot. But Australia Day is kind of a non-fiction about Australia Day, which is a day that we celebrate in Australia, which we shouldn't. I'm very much in the group of change the date. If you don't know what that's about, go look it up. It's very important. But this book kind of talks about all of that, and it's, I think, a book that a lot of Australians really should read to kind of get more of an understanding on what's going on, and really important read. The next prompt is Orange on the Cover. So for this I have Finding Nevo by Nevo Zizin, but this is a memoir by Nevo, who is a queer, I believe, non-binary individual, and this is kind of about their like teenage years, or at least the teenage years are what really stuck out most for me, because oh man, did I relate to so much of what Nevo was talking about, like to a scary point where I'm like, did you hack my life? It was weird how many similarities there were, but it was a really good book. And something else I really loved about this was like where the dedication would go, there was a acknowledgement of country. Like, you don't see that in books, and that was a really amazing thing to put in a book. And I thought it was lovely the way that was done. And yeah, just a really interesting story to read. Next up is just kind of all of the Tor Quest books by Emily Rodda. They all kind of have this like outline of kind of orangey thing, but at least in like the first book, Forest of Silence, there's a lot of orange on the cover. But this is a middle grade fantasy series. It's a really fun time, and it's a very typical fantasy. There's one person, the chosen one, sent on a quest to save all the kingdoms, and they got to go to all these different places to find gems, and they put the gems on the belt, and once the belt is complete, everyone will be saved. But it's a really fun time, super entertaining, it kind of just like hooks you in, and it's a really interesting world, so highly, highly recommend those. And the last one for orange cover is Young Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe. I know there is the full-size adult version, which is just Dark Emu. I was always too intimidated to read the full novel, so when I saw that there was a kind of like easier read version of that, I picked up that instead and read that, and it was really good. There was some pictures and it was nice. It was really easily digestible, but Dark Emu is kind of about the way that agriculture has developed in Australia. Let's put it that way. And it was really interesting, and it really made me want to read the full book. I'm still a bit too intimidated, but I'll get to that one day. But if you do find Dark Emu to be too intimidating, I do highly recommend Young Dark Emu. It gives you a lot of the main points of the story, but in a really easily read way, and you can really understand what Bruce Pascoe is trying to get across. Then the next prompt is set in Australia. So for this, I have The Cavern by Alistair Hodge. This was such a good like horror book, and it's about these people going to investigate a new cave that has opened up in the country and all of the mines that lead into it. There's a creature in there, and it was such fun. We need more Australian horror, because like it was really good, and you always have this aspect of, especially this one, it was like, you know, kind of in a desert. So it was like that just oppressive heat and dust and isolation that comes with kind of the middle of Australia. So that was really interesting, and these like kind of isolated communities that keep to themselves. Super interesting, and it was such a fun time. I really want some more Australian horror books, but I especially need to read more of Alistair Hodge's work. Next up is Past the Shallows by Favell Parrott. This book, whoa. It hit so hard. I didn't expect it. It was fantastic. And I still think about this book today, and I read it like 2 or 3 years ago. But this is about three brothers and their relationship with their dad, who goes out fishing a lot, and all of them have their own points of view in the story, and it's really, it feels like a slice of life, but there is this like foreboding over the whole story. Things happen at the end and it's very sad, but you know, this like bond of brotherhood is very sweet, and it's a story that like there's no real plot, but you're so hooked. I didn't put the book down. I read it all in one sitting because I couldn't stop. It was really well done. And the last one is The Truro Murders by Ryan Green. This is a non-fiction about a true crime that happened in Australia, and that it happened around Truro, which is a town in Australia. And it was a very easy read. There was nothing too particularly nuanced about it. The level of detail was a bit baseline, but this was all kind of told from the point of view of the murderer's accomplice. That was a really interesting take on it. I haven't ever read a book where it's, you know, a serial killer's accomplice before. Like, that was a really interesting dynamic to work with. And it was like interesting to hear about this very vicious crime that I had no idea about. So always good to learn things, even if it's about serial killers. Then the last prompt I'm going to talk about is indie or self-published. First one I have for this is 5 Ways by Ian Commons. This is a book about 5 people that get on the same bus, and it's just going through their lives and what led them all to be on this bus. It was not a story that I typically enjoy, and I honestly don't know why I kept reading it, because it shouldn't have been something I enjoyed, but I did. There were definitely some points of view that I preferred over others. It was just an interesting little, like, 5 slices of life, and like, it was a good time. So if you can find it, give it a read. Next up is Wolfskin by Alison Evans. This is a short novella that I think you can still get on the author's website, because that's where I got it from. And it's a weird little book, but really entertaining. Very kind of haunting writing style. And it's about these 2 people that meet one night, and one of them is kind of a werewolf. I'm not really sure how to describe them. And the other one is like made of crystals. And it was just a super interesting concept, and I kind of want to reread it. And like, I want like an entire full-length novel out of this, because It was really interesting, and I don't really know how to describe it, but if you like short, kind of weird books, give this one a go. And then the last one is Fractured Shards by Dan Furigal. This is a comic series. It's a sci-fi dystopian crime kind of world. There's this one detective that we are following. He's a bit rough around the edges, but he can see these like memory shards from people or objects kind of thing. It's really hard to explain, but he sees these memory things and he's like, ah, okay, I know who done it. And he can then go and find out who's done the crime. These are an interesting time. I mean, I started reading them because I really like Dan Furigal. He's an actor and he was my favorite character on one of my favorite shows, which was Spartacus. And so when he came out with a comic book, I was like, yeah, I'll read that. And volume 3 is about to come out, but I'm getting them from Kickstarter. I'm sure you can find them somewhere. It's just that it's a really interesting concept and it's a good time. So I would recommend that as well. Anyways, that is my recommendation video for the Australian Readathon. Like I said, all of the links for the announcement video and all the co-hosts will be in the link down below. Check out some of these books if you would like to. You've got all of November to read them. And be sure to check out all the co-hosts' channels because they've also done some recommendation videos. But that'll be it for this one. So thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!